Hey, Matt, guess what?
Chicken butt.
We're in the future.
Wow, this really feels like the present.
All right, guys. So, as of recording this, I have not seen any of the current season of Better Call Saul. So, I'm going to just kind of lay out my predictions. And by the time you're hearing this, we will have both seen all of the Better Call Saul, and we're about to jump into the future where we're both talking about it. So, but for now,
And I have seen all of this season, so I am going to give my predictions as well.
yes.
And then Brian will have to decide if I'm trolling him or not.
Well, one of the big
Prediction one, they all die in a nuclear explosion.
yes, except for all the people who are in Breaking Bad.
Except for them. They are monsters.
Yep. So one of the big questions is Lalo, because in Breaking Bad, Saul makes this comment at the beginning, "Oh, Lalo didn't send you," implying that Lalo's alive. However, later on, when Gus is about to, taking pride in destroying Hector Salamanca, he tells him, "You are the last Salamanca left," which means Lalo. I think Lalo has to be dead, and I don't even think it's a retcon. I think it's just a situation where Saul's not really involved in that story too much. I think Saul just doesn't know that Lalo's dead, and so I think some point in the future he's got to be dead. I'm a little back and forth on Nacho. I think he's either dead or else Nacho might have this thing where he just disappears, and kind of like Jesse at the end of Breaking Bad, he just goes off into the wind and disappears. But I think we're definitely going to get a lot of good stuff from them in the final season.
Yep. So prediction one, Lalo dead. Prediction two, Nacho not dead.
Yes. Prediction three. Okay, Nacho. Okay. This prediction number three is I think we have to have someone be the first one to officially use Robert Forster's character, the disappearing guy, which would be weird because obviously he's dead. They have to shoot around that. But I think that Kim isn't dead. I think that Kim, something big is going to happen, and that she's going to use the vacuum cleaner salesman guy, and she's going to go off with a new identity, and then she's just gone. And I think that in the flash forward where Jimmy Saul is Gene, I think she's going to come back and have some kind of big reunion scene with him at that point. So that's why I think the other option is possibly Nacho uses that guy, but it wouldn't be as emotional of moments. So that's what I think. I think Kim's going to use that disappearing guy and come back to him in the future. I don't know. It's easy to say that Saul's going to die in the future flash forwards, but everybody dies, so maybe he gets to live happily ever after. I honestly don't have a prediction on that one.
All right. So
and
there you go.
Again,
prediction four is no prediction about Saul. Prediction
yes.
three, Kim disappears and reappears.
Yep.
Prediction four, Saul is there.
Prediction five, Howard just continues practicing law, and because he hasn't really had as soon as Chuck died, Howard had no interesting storylines.
And practice makes perfect. So
yeah,
there's that.
So or either that or he could die. I mean, I think he's listed as a main character, which is sometimes you have a show where they're listed as a main character, but they don't do anything with them. For the last two seasons of Lost, Desmond was barely there until the very end.
I'm barely here right now, so
yeah. So that's what I'm thinking. And listeners, right now we're gonna go. That's our future time. That's our future noise, meaning we're going to jump into the future where me and Matt will both have seen it. So enjoy this little blast from the past.
And if you hear that noise, again, someone around you is using time travel. So
yep.
Take care. Welcome to TV Guys, where if you need a guest host who cares a lot about soccer, better call Paul. I'm Matt.
It's an inside joke for one listener.
Well, I mean, he's been on the show before, so people might be like, "Oh yeah, Paul, I remember him."
He is our most frequent listener, or our most frequent guest, and he's probably listening to this episode.
He number one guest of frequency.
Yes, actually, right now he is.
Okay.
He's been on 6 times.
Okay, because I know Jeff has been on a good amount, and who else?
And Mike has been on a bunch
and
too.
Mike,
I have a list somewhere of everyone's stats.
Man, you get named up. Hey, we love to actually have guests with us, and
Yeah.
so we would love for to branch out a little bit. And if you're like, I've been listening a long time, and I just want to try it out on one episode, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, we'd love to have you with us.
You can either suggest an episode or else you can just say, hey, fill me in, whatever you got.
Yeah, and then we'll put you on for a show that you don't watch, and you'll be like, I don't know what Stranger Things is about. Be like, too bad, we're talking about it. So deal with that.
Listeners, tell me if you want to. So I've never seen any Star Trek, and I'm sorry for those of you who love Star Trek. I want to do an episode where you have to bring on a guest. You and Matt, you and the guest can actually talk about Star Trek, and I will pick one episode of one series at random to watch, and I'm just going to keep referencing that episode. It's like the time that Spock said this.
Yeah, it'll be like the Michael speech where he's comparing ants to Bug's Life. He's like,
yeah.
Again, and I've only seen Bug's Life.
Yeah.
Man, I'm excited for this episode. Like, we're fluffing it right now, but we really should get in the meat of this because there's so much to talk about. You know, we've got obviously the whole sixth season that we haven't even touched before. We've talked a little bit about Better Call Saul. I think we've had an episode about Better Call Saul. Is that right?
No, we've done one about Breaking Bad. We have not done one about Better Call Saul yet.
Okay, so we're gonna hit the whole breadth of work of Better Call Saul, and there's a lot to talk about, and there's so much that I'm like, I love that. This is like the best show on TV. Even though it ended last year, it is the best prestige drama I think I've ever watched. It's fantastic. If you haven't watched it, I'm not sure why you're listening to this episode. It just shows how much of a fan you are of us, which is really flattering. So thanks, guys.
Also, I'm not sure if they're listening, but shout out to JP and Riley from Cub Foods, who I just converted us into listeners.
Nice. You were part of. I just converted. It makes it feel like a cult almost. I've converted them. They drink Kool-Aid.
I told them about the podcast, and like the next time I went into work, they're like, "Hey, I listened to your podcast." I'm like, "Which one?"
Nice.
The Parks and Rec one.
That was a good one. Yeah. Parks and Rec episode was really good. The grumpy characters episode, I really liked. I felt like I was like really funny on that episode. I don't always feel like I'm like on like super funny. I mean, I am a lot, but that episode, I'm like, I
love the character type ones, and I have a bunch of them in mind, ready to go. Like, there's so many more that I want to do.
Yeah. But so Better Call Saul, it's a great show. If you haven't seen it, go see it. That's all we're done. And obviously we're going to spoil it because we're talking about the final season too.
Well, let's start with our predictions, or my predictions.
Oh, sure.
That our listeners just heard. So listeners, that cold open you heard when I'm giving my predictions was 7 months ago. And since then, I've now finished the whole series.
And I remember, because I have such great memory, exactly what you said. But why don't you, even though you just said it on here, say those predictions again for everyone to hear? All
right. And yeah, I definitely didn't just listen to it before we started here. I definitely remember.
Of course not.
Well, the one that I got 100% right, I got one right, was the whole thing about how Lalo was dead, but that Saul didn't know that he was dead.
The whole time.
Yeah. And that because, same thing like in Breaking Bad, it was so personal for Gus to tell Hector, "You're the last Salamanca left." And so for that to have weight, Lalo couldn't be out there. There couldn't be another Salamanca out there. So I was right about that.
Yeah, he definitely did need to die in order for the events of Breaking Bad to make sense. And they wrote themselves into, like, right away with him. I'm sure they knew right away that this is a character that they're going to bring on to be a big presence and then die before the end of the series.
Yeah. Another one prediction I got partially right. I did say that Kim was still alive and that she was going to come back in the flash forwards and just kind of have like a big moment in the end, which was true. The only thing I didn't get right, which they may have done if Robert Forster was still alive, I thought that they were going to use the vacuum salesman Robert Forster who like makes people disappear. They did have a call out to him when they got the guy's black book of all the sketchy people. They found his card.
Yep.
And I still think that if he was alive, that he would have had a cameo for sure.
Yeah, because he did have that cameo early on in that season. You're right, but I think that they filmed that season twice, like in two separate chunks because of Bob Odenkirk's heart attack, and that's also where that little break came in. So if you're watching it on Netflix, that like you didn't watch it on AMC and you had to catch it on Netflix, they broke up the season into two chunks, and there was about a month and a half in between two episodes. And the episode that it ended on in that first chunk was at the very end of the episode, Howard gets shot and he dies. And that's how it leaves us for a month and a half. And you're like, are you kidding me? But it makes it really good television for when it comes back because it's super hyped. And then that next episode, Lalo dies. So to break up those two, it felt like a lot longer than like when we were binging and you're like, oh, Howard died. Oh, wait, no, Lalo died. Okay, they're all dead.
See, I watched it back to back, so I didn't get that at all. Also, another prediction I had that was wrong. I said, yeah, Howard's probably just out there practicing law.
I didn't think Howard would die until so there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and I actually even messaged you about some behind the scenes stuff with Patrick Fabian, the actor who plays Howard Hamlin.
Yeah.
So there was a picture that made the rounds on the internet where he posted on his Instagram of a picture with him and Bob Odenkirk and them smiling, and I think that he said something about like it was a wrap for them, like for filming for that, something like that. But that picture was on the internet, and people saw at the very corner of his hair, there was a little bit of red from where that blood splatter would have been. So they saw in his blonde hair a little bit of red still because it was he took the picture right after that scene. So people are like, he's dead. He's got that's blood that he has in his hair. He dies. I'm sure Howard Hamlin dies. And then there was another snafu that happened because Bob Odenkirk had a heart attack, and he had a heart attack during that scene. So when Howard Hamlin is there, or Patrick Fabian is there, Rhea Seehorn's there, and Tony Dalton is there. Yeah. And both Patrick Fabian and Tony Dalton are on record. They're talking about how they were there when that happened. And then the writers or producers or someone was just like, there's no reason for these two characters to be on set together. So Tony Dalton, who played Lalo, you can't say that you were there when about his heart attack. So then Tony doesn't say anything else again after that because it's like it gives away that Lalo kills Howard by knowing that those two actors had a scene together.
Yeah, I mean, technically you could have said like, oh, maybe he wasn't filming, but he was there hanging out on the set, which that could have been true. But it's still, I get what they're saying. Like it was jarring to see Howard be in that world. Like those two worlds didn't really collide that much.
Yeah. And I'll talk a lot more about that when we talk about Mike, because I kind of want to talk about some characters and their arcs for the whole show and where they end. And Mike is a great character that bears that weight of people not in the world, or how they refer to it. Their language is that, are you in the game or not in the game? Oh,
pause real quick. Also, I predicted that Nacho would still be alive, and clearly I was wrong about that. So, unpause.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what my predictions were, and this is going back a year and a half, and obviously I don't have any sort of proof of what my predictions were of how close it was. I do think that I had the same thing of Lalo being dead and Kim being alive, but I waffled on Kim. I mean, anyone who's watching the show, you go back and forth of like, well, how does Kim get out of the picture? And you know, in season 5, when like it looks like Kim is getting deeper after Jimmy is like, oh, call me Saul at the end of the 4th season. And then there's like, it seems like she's like, how do I reconcile with? And then instead she's like, I don't know what we're supposed to do. I think we just get married. And you're like, that is not where I expected this argument to go. And like, Kim just keeps getting deeper into the Jimmy hole. Because like season 2 and 3, she's a lot more moral and uncorrupted than she is in 4 and 5 and 6.
But you can tell that she, even like early on when they do that thing, I think it's like the first season where they are at like the bar and they're schmoozing the money guy, the finance guy, and like paying for their whole drinks and everything. Like you can tell she got a rush from that con.
Yep. All right. Let's refocus our conversation because I want to go kind of in order here. There's I want to hit all these characters, and there's a lot more to talk about with Kim, but that's a great start. So let's back up. So Better Call Saul can be divided into 2 different arcs, seasons 1 through 3 and seasons 4 through 6, in my opinion, because those seasons contain like one main antagonist for each of them. And so seasons 1 to 3 is really defined by Chuck. And seasons 4 through 6 is a lot more defined by Lalo and his threat. And so let's back up to Chuck, because you don't have a show without Chuck. You don't have a Saul Goodman without Chuck.
No.
And Chuck was such a dynamic character because he's a jerk and you wanted to see the comeuppance of him, but he's also 90% right. It's like you're right in the way of you're going about it the wrong way, but yet all of your concerns are 100% warranted.
Yeah. The interesting thing is that you don't necessarily realize that Chuck is like the main villain at first, because they really present Howard as like this slimy jerk. And like, because
Yeah.
you see a lot of characters like Howard, like, oh, he's the rich lawyer who's kind of full of himself, and he has some of those attributes, especially in the beginning. It seems like, and Jimmy even thinks that Howard is the one derailing him and who doesn't want him in HHM and all
Yep.
that. And then later on, you realize that Howard is under the thumb of Chuck, and Chuck
Yeah.
was saying like, this is how it's going to be, and you're going to take the blame for it.
Mm-hmm.
And when that realization came through, it kind of softened Howard a little bit when you realized that he had no control over it. He was so powered by Chuck.
Yeah, exactly. In season 3, in the chicanery episode, when this was like one of the best episodes to me, as watching the comeuppance of Chuck, because it's that bar review that Jimmy is having, and Chuck is on the witness stand, and he goes on that tirade about like, not our Jimmy, no, it was like it was the 1612, one after the Magna Carta, and he's just losing it in front of everyone, just like screaming about like how he was right, he saw this in Jimmy, and he comes off as a crazy person. And in that episode, after he gets done with the screaming, then it like looks at the exit sign where it's like he realizes he's in the battery, and then it also looks at the face of Hamlin, and Howard is just beside himself, like, this was it, this was what I was afraid of, that Howard had slowly been like, Chuck, please listen to me, and been more asserting of that. And finally Chuck snapped, and Howard didn't think he'd go that far, but he saw him in a completely new light, and the way Howard treated Chuck after that was never the same.
Yeah. No, those two were never really on the same side after that point.
Yeah. And Chuck, his relationship with Jimmy too, like Chuck has some of these like fantastic moments and these fantastic lines that, like, the way that he presents it, Michael McKean does a fantastic job, by the way. But the way that he presents some of these lines, like, you remember his lines so well. Like, early on in season 1, when Jimmy finally confronts him of like, it was you this whole time, and Chuck was like, you know, talking about how sacred the law is, but it's like, but you wielding the law would be like a chimpanzee wielding a machine gun. And it's like, that is a great quote, and I remember that quote because it's like, that's Jimmy would remember that. Jimmy's going to remember that line for the rest of his life, of like how it pierces. Or in one of the final moments that he has with Chuck is when Chuck's just trying to get him out of the house, and like trying to come off like there's this brave front that, yeah, he can use electricity, he's fine, none of this actually has bothered him. And to get Jimmy out of the house, he says, truth is, you've never mattered all that much to me. And like, wow, what a hard thing to hear when all Jimmy wanted was his brother's respect.
Yeah. Like, and if Chuck had given Jimmy a little bit more respect, or any respect, the entire rest of the series and Breaking Bad doesn't happen.
Yeah. And yeah, Jimmy in the final episode does like accept the responsibility, and that's what seasons 4 through 6 is, of like that subtext for him is he's running away from the responsibility that he had of Chuck killing himself. And you know, it's like, sure, he wasn't the one who got him killed, but he was a part of it, and he of course is going to blame himself. And Howard blaming himself allowed Jimmy to be like, yeah, I'll blame you too. And it's this smoke screen, and why he was so terrible to Howard for those couple seasons. And Howard offers him a job, and he throws bowling balls at his car. That's not a rational response.
No.
And so for him to, go ahead.
I was thinking, and Howard, like, until the last season, like those couple, like 4 and 5, like he was barely even there.
Yeah, 6th season he came back in a lot more. Yeah, I really like that choice in the final episode, though, when he's giving his testimony in front of the judge and pretty much committing himself to getting the harsher sentence, even though talking down to 7.5 years. There's in that courtroom, it still has the shot of the exit sign to mirror the one from Chicanery, kind of in a like Chuck is watching over him right now as he's speaking, or like
Yeah.
at least the sense and the spirit of Chuck, or the guilt of Chuck, that
Yeah.
metaphor is hanging over him
Yeah.
as he's sharing this, and he's finally coming to that. That was a really good resolution of that side of his relationship with Chuck.
Oh, for sure. So Matt, let me ask you this: do you think if you took out all the flash forward scenes, I mean, I was thinking about this. Wouldn't really work, but it would work for a little while. You could watch most of Better Call Saul as a first viewing without watching Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
Only problem is that Better Call Saul without the flash forwards doesn't really have an ending point. It would just kind of like be abrupt, like, and then now you're in Breaking Bad, and then you because then the resolution all comes in those flash forwards where it's very sparing in the beginning, and then like the last few episodes, it's like almost all flash forwards.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the last four, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That's why. So I'm trying to decide which order to go here. Okay,
Yeah.
we'll take this for a moment. That's why, to me, I felt like Breaking Bad had a better finale, but that Better Call Saul was the better show overall. And it's not that Better Call Saul dropped the ball in the finale, but it did have a lot more loose threads that is wrapping up, because it had the task of wrapping up two different shows. It wrapped up, if you pay attention to kind of that final episode, and we can talk about this when we get to Jimmy's arc, is it did wrap up a Gene arc, it wrapped up a Saul arc, and it wrapped up a Jimmy arc. It gave resolution for 3 different layers of Jimmy's character.
Mm-hmm.
That is hard to do, and I applaud the writing for that, but because there was so much of that happening in that finale, and we got the action part of the resolution done 4 episodes prior, that's why it's just a little weaker than the Breaking Bad one.
And I just gotta say, side note, it was terrific casting to bring Carol Burnett into that role in the end.
And especially to give, like, for her to be what gets him caught, because it goes back to those early days when he actually was helping people.
He started with Elder Law.
Exactly. That was a great inspired choice, and you get a legend like Carol Burnett to be that stand-in for it.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like in that the penultimate episode, when he's like holding the wire of the phone as she's clutching to her life alert thing, and he's getting closer. You're like, are you going to kill an old woman? This is irredeemable, sir. Like, we were mad at a couple of things that Saul did in the show, but it's like the thing that made me the maddest before that was when he isolated Irene at the end of season 3 and made like everyone in the nursing home hate her. And he's like, oh crap, well now I have to burn all my bridges of elder law and get caught with the was it Aaron? Yeah, Aaron, I think, was the lawyer who, like, when he was doing the yoga and had the microphone on, staging that whole thing. Like, so in the bingo, when she wins and she gets to the front and she looks out and no one applauds and she just throws down her prize and runs out, you're like, that is the most I've ever hated Saul, and he got people killed.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's a special kind of awfulness.
Yeah. Just taking away the friends that someone, like, she doesn't have a lot of time left to make new friends. You can't do that to someone.
No.
All right, we'll back up here and we'll get back to this. Before we were talking about Chuck. Unless you don't have anything else to say about Chuck.
No, not about Chuck.
I really wanted to quickly just say the lawyers in this show. So many of them I absolutely love. I really love the character of Rich Schweikert. I love Cliff Main. Yeah. And I like Howard Hamlin because he is, like, he's not perfect, but they do a good job of, like, throwing a lot of stuff at him that makes you want to root for him, even despite his flaws. You're like, okay, you put Kim and Doc review for a little bit too long. You are a little bit entitled. You have some arrogance, but overall, like, he doesn't do anything quote unquote wrong. Like, he's not nearly as bad. He just has some personality stuff to work through, but overall he tries to do the right thing. He tries to do right by people, and he's a resilient like, there's a lot to admire about Hamlin.
Oh yeah, I mean, I especially like Cliff Main. He's like one of my favorites. I love him. I like that he didn't have to die.
Yes.
And something else with Cliff, so that especially this last season, he was kind of like buddy pairing with Howard Hamlin, and they started early on, always showing that Howard's car. What did the license plate say again? It was like a specialty license
Namaste.
plate. Namaste.
Yep.
And they kept showing that, and they kept telegraphing that, and they did some stuff with the car, like when they did the whole um, Jimmy steals the car and makes Cliff think that he like threw a hooker out of the car, all that. You think that that's why we needed to see the license plate, but really, you needed to be able to identify his car just for that flash forward where they show the car on the beach after he died.
Yeah.
And they set that up so well.
One of the episodes, a season before that, is Namaste. And that's the title of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
So they keep drawing your attention to it for sure.
Yeah. But no, Cliff is my favorite, especially that when Jimmy worked for him and like he kept trying to do everything he could to get fired.
I felt so bad. And especially when he finally has the confrontation and like he fires him. And then Jimmy like has that moment of like, for what it's worth, I think you're a great guy. And then Cliff is like, well, for what it's worth, I think you're an a-hole.
Yeah.
Like the guy gave him so many opportunities. And for him to also ask the question of like, well, Jimmy, if you knew that this wasn't going to fit, why did you even take this job? And it's such a fair question.
Mm-hmm.
Like the guy gave a fair shake over and over and over. And he even was going to give Kim a fair shake with her like proposal thing she wanted to do. Mm-hmm. That was kind of a facade at first, but then he bought into it. And it's just like, wait, I can actually help people.
Yeah.
So,
which is what Kim was all about. Kim was always all about helping people.
Yeah. And Schweikert, what I really liked about him is that he was just like, there's chaos that happens around it. He just kind of rolled with it and he kept the professionalism and he kept like he knew that Kim was screwing things up with that one with Mesa Verde and that she was trying to torpedo it. And he's like, he doesn't understand why, but he kind of like called her out but did it in the most professional way of like, we're just going to pull you off of it. And she's like, why? And like demanded, he's like, do you really want me to say why? And like some things are better left unsaid. And he like confronted, he's like, I know that this is you. And yet the fact that like he still was able to keep professionalism with her and still like he had so much, he didn't take anything personally. I think that's what I liked the most about him. They did this crap and he's like, all right, you're children, but I'm just going to keep doing what I do.
Yeah. He was just all business.
Yeah, great guy, great characters. Yes. All right, so let's move into the other side of the coin of Lalo.
Yeah.
And we could talk about Salamancas as well, including this, but Lalo is what I love about Lalo and why he stands out from the other Salamancas is because they're so stoic, even though Hector has a little bit more like gloating and braggy behavior. But like they are hardcore evil. Yes. And they're not like, let me have fun. And then here comes Lalo, who is very charismatic. But he is erratic as well. So he's all smiles and all charisma, but he is just as evil as them. And so that character stands in stark opposition of what we've seen of other Salamancas. And it is a frightening combination.
I think the only person he ever really cared about was Hector. And I mean, probably the cousins too, and Tuco, like basically like the Salamancos.
Yeah.
Were like the ones he cared about. Other than that, nobody. He would do anything for Hector, but anybody else in the world, no matter, he doesn't like bat an eye. Oh, I killed this person to get where I need. Okay, bang.
Yeah, and it's all family. Like that, you're 100% right. It's all family. It is so thick, those ties, and that like family is everything, and anything that's not family is a threat. And so even though they were standing up for Fring and like that he was an earner and like he would bring in money, he's like, I don't care about this money. I've got enough money. I care about family, and this guy is not family, and you're trying to welcome him like he is. And that's where the Salamancas were in like friction with Fring, even from the very beginning in that Breaking Bad that the very first thing we see with Fring, where he's there with his partner and he gets shot and then Fring's on the edge of the pool. It's like, that was this whole thing of like, don't you forget that you are never going to be a part of us, that you are here for as long as we allow it. And Fring never did.
Nope. And you see from that moment, that flashback was in Breaking Bad, wasn't it? Where his partner got killed by Hector.
Yep.
Like that was the moment when he's like, everybody in this room, like Eladio, Hector, and Bolsa, like all three of them got killed, but maybe not all directly, but they all got killed because of Gus.
Yeah. Yeah, he would have killed Hector himself if Walt hadn't gotten to him first, but he did
Yeah.
kill Bolsa and Eladio.
Yeah, and like you can tell, like his entire career like was based on revenge.
Yeah.
And that's especially for Hector, because Hector's the one who pulled the trigger. The other two let it happen. And yeah, that's why like the whole "you're the last Salamanca," like he had that planned decades ago.
You know, it's funny that you say that because now it gives me so. Because I was thinking about Fring and I was thinking about him living life. He's like, you've got so much money available to you. And like, that's the last we see of Fring too, is him realizing or like noticing I can't allow myself pleasures of life because he has that wine that he's going to be drinking. And there's the guy who's talking to him that I think he has some sort of attraction to. And so that was the last we see of Fring in this universe, in this show. And then when the other guy, the waiter, goes to get another like fancier glass of wine, he just leaves it and goes. He had that look on his face of realizing I can't enjoy all of this money. And that moment made me think of like, well, then why does he do what he does? Why does he keep doing it if he doesn't get to reap the benefits of this? Like, I know that there's a power thing, but why? What would really be his motivation? And it makes me realize now, if you're saying that, it's like, it doesn't matter about the money. What matters is the revenge. And that he is the most patient character I've ever seen in any show, to be able to wait that long and to orchestrate things the way he did to save Hector's life so that he can rub it in his face that he killed every member of his family. That is cold.
Yeah.
And to have your life dedicated to that, wow.
Yeah, basically he said Hector dies when I say he can die.
Yep. Oh, what a good character Fring was. Glad that they brought him in Breaking Bad and that they brought him back.
Also, how much of an intense moment was it after Nacho killed himself, and then the brothers carried Hector over and they put a gun in his hand so he could still shoot Nacho's dead body?
He just kept going at it. All right, we have not talked about Nacho yet, and we need to talk about Nacho because Nacho is the Jesse Pinkman of Better Call Saul.
Absolutely.
He got in over his head. He made too many mistakes, and now he's trying to make up for them, and he's trying to do the right thing, and he just can't.
Yeah, because you can tell he didn't have to be in this game, and you see that with especially with his dad, and that heartbreaking scene at the end where Mike basically told his dad like, Nacho's not coming back, but they'll get their comeuppance, and his dad's like, why? What good is going to come from that?
Yeah. It's like that's not, he says that he'll get justice. It's like, justice? That's not justice. What you're talking about is revenge. And that's a good moment for Mike. And we'll get a little bit more into Mike because Mike views the Nacho and his dad, that relationship, in a similar light, but reverse from him and his son, Matty. That one of them's compromised and the other one is trying to do the right thing. And that, in him talking to Nacho's dad and like caring as much about his dad is that he sees Nacho's dad as he sees Matty and trying to reconcile that problem from the past. Yeah. But Michael Mando in this final scene, holy cow, when he is just staring down the Salamancas and he's just telling them is like, no, it was me. And he's reveling in that, even though he's staring death in the face. That was tremendous acting.
When he tells Hector, like, you're in that chair because of me. Yeah. Like that. Yeah. It's like, whoa.
You said tense scene. I think a more tense scene was when he slips the pills into Hector's coat to begin with. Like, what he's going for because you saw him practicing it. And like they take their time with that scene as he's switching out the pills underneath the table and then like making sure that everything is together and then puts it back on. And then he has the one shot as he walks by him. And the entire time you're like, come on, you got it. You got it. That was so well done. I think the last thing too that I have about Nacho is, talking about him trying to get out of the game. He wasn't that way in the early seasons. He was a part of things with Tuco. He was going to rip off the Kettlemans. He was fine with that. He kind of framed Tuco too to get him put in jail. And and then he was doing the drug deals with Mark Prosh, who
that was hilarious. That little bits is where like that's where it turned into a sitcom, but like it was a great sitcom.
Like he plays that nerdy, stupid, over the in over his head character really well.
I forget, he didn't die, did he?
Nope.
How
He
did
got his
that
baseball
character
cards
survive?
stolen. And then the last time that we see him is that Nacho goes to him and saying, I need you to get these pills so that I can put sugar in them and switch them with Hector's. That was the last we see of him. But like, Nacho's just doing that stuff to get money and, a little bit of the invincibility thing. And then what he realizes and what changes and shifts his character completely is when Hector's like, well, I'm going to take over your dad's shop and I'm going to go ahead and run things through there. And from that moment, he's like, there's no way out of this for me that keeps my dad safe. Yeah. And you see him fight against that for 3 seasons.
Mm-hmm. And like, of course, Hector was like, yeah, we'll keep your dad safe. But when Hector means that, what he means is like, as long as your dad has a purpose for me, he's fine.
Yeah. And then, he goes to help Gus, and then Gus has the gun at his dad's head as well. And I do like that caused friction between him and Mike, between Fring and Mike.
Yeah.
Yep.
Should we talk about Mike?
Let's talk about Mike. There's so many characters I love, but man, I think Mike's my favorite. I really have a soft spot for Mike. I just love his demeanor. So we talked early on about like one of his big driving forces, apart from the death of Maddie, and it kind of factors into what he's talking about, is that Mike really cares about only getting people that are in the game. Mm-hmm. And he is really hit hard by the people that aren't in the game. We see him do 2 kills early on, and those are the cops that are corrupted, but that's a flashback. But the first kill that we see Mike do in this universe that's not that flashback is when he kills Warner Ziegler. And Ziegler is not in the game. And he fights and tries to convince Fring that there's got to be some other way. And he knows that there's not. And he knows that if he's not the one who does it, that Mike is going to be accountable for whoever is going to show up and kill Ziegler. So he has to be the one to do it. And that scene of them under the stars and Ziegler finally actually realizing what was at stake and what his actions cost him is that long scene. It's so well done. And it's just so sad.
Yeah. Also, I mean, it would have most likely been way worse if anyone else but Mike did it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, you talked about like, I think it was in some conversations you talked about something with like Hamlin and getting buried. And just like what I wanted to say was the same thing with Mike, is that like you have this really powerful moment with Mike as he's looking down at Hamlin in the grave next to Lalo. And you can see it on Jonathan Banks' face of like the pain he has that this poor guy has to get buried next to this monster for the rest of the time. And no one's going to know.
Yeah. Also, I read that those guys actually did, Tony Dalton and Patrick Fabian actually did lay down in that grave together.
And they fell asleep. They had a nice nap. It was a Joey Ross situation.
Yeah. I still think of Patrick Fabian as the professor from Saved by the Bell, the college years.
I never saw that, so I do not.
He had an awkward relationship where he was a single dad in his late 30s who was dating Kelly, who was a college freshman. Yeah,
that awkward is a light term for it.
I mean, everything was legal.
True. I mean, I guess we just mentioned Ross. Ross did the same thing, but at least that show was like, Ross, this is icky.
Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah. All right. Like Mike's arc in Breaking Bad is different than his arc in this. And it's great that they decided to include Mike, because we get to see how he went from disgraced cop into the Fring Empire. Yeah. And I really loved the journey along the way and seeing some of the stuff. There was some of the time when, like, I think it was the 3rd season when I started realizing like Mike and Saul kind of have stopped interacting, and their storylines just veered and branched off. And then like they would bring them together every now and then, but they would have like drastically different storylines for like the final seasons.
But then somehow they had to come together because Mike was one of Saul's guys in Breaking Bad.
Yeah. So it was good to see those tie-ins. Like I loved Bagman, that episode when him and Saul were in the desert and they have
Oh yeah.
the $7 million. Like that felt like a classic Breaking Bad episode. That was
Hmm.
just like dopamine of, yeah, this doesn't feel like Better Call Saul in this episode. This feels like Breaking Bad.
Yeah. So who is it? Just Jimmy and Kim we have left?
Yep. I think so.
So let's start with Kim, obviously. Save
We
Jimmy
could
Salt
talk about
Jimmy.
Fring, but I mean, we've talked a little bit about him, and I think we're
Mhm.
okay. Yeah, let's talk about Kim because we were talking about talking about like her thing for charity. She is a lady. She is Lady Macbeth. Like Lady Macbeth in that classic play, she's got the blood on her hands. Like she doesn't actually have blood on her hands, but like she's awoken at night with all this guilt of like I've got to get this blood off, and like knows what she's done. And that's what Kim is. Kim has like the guilt of what she's doing, but she's having too much fun, and so she has to like kind of balance out that guilt with charitable work. It's like the more that she falls in with Jimmy and what he's doing and the way that he hurts
Mhm.
people, the more she's like, I have to help people. I have to like commit to this one guy who's not going to leave his land for Mesa
Yep.
Verde, or I have to do all these pro bono cases, or I have to leave Mesa Verde, period. And
Hmm.
like she just keeps making all these self-destructive choices because she's so focused on I need to help, I need to help, I need to make things right.
Hmm.
And it's tragic to watch her fall like that for these like last 3 seasons.
Yeah, it is. And she's another one. Kind of, her and Jimmy both like their trajectories from the start of the show could have gone way different.
Yeah. It's such a good scene. Their final scene that they have before he really turns into Saul. They have some more later, but it's like when she's going to be leaving after they had Hamlin's funeral, and one of the last lines is when Jimmy's like, "But I love you," and she's like, "I love you too, but so what?" Like, oh my gosh, just 3 words, but so what are so powerful because it's really like, yeah, they care about each other so much, but they're not good for each other.
Hmm.
Them being together brings out the worst in each other. And Kim maybe thought early on she could make a better, a more respectable lawyer out of Jimmy. And Jimmy's like, well, I see this slipping Kimmy,
Hmm.
so to speak.
Yeah.
And that they had fun and they enjoyed things and they were really a good, strong team, but they weren't a good moral team.
No,
And
not at all.
like Kim is such a great character too, and like they learned their lesson with Skylar because when you look back at Breaking Bad, like Skylar was a good voice of reason. That is how a normal person would
Yeah.
respond to her life falling apart. Is that she doesn't make the right choices, she doesn't know exactly what to do. She's just
Hmm.
trying to do the right thing, and it's really hard to know what that is. So
Yeah.
we can't blame her. It doesn't make for a good TV character so much.
No.
Whereas Kim is corruptible and she tries to do the right thing too, but she just has such a love for Jimmy that it is corrupt, and she has a desire. There's that part of her that like we see in flashbacks her mom was that way, and so there's
Hmm.
part of like in her code that and in her upbringing that's like there is a slip in Kimmy that's there
Oh yeah.
and trying to break its way out.
She was trying to escape it, but it found her.
Yeah, yeah. Jimmy called it out.
Yeah.
And Rhea, what was your favorite Kim moment?
What was it? I think. Uh, it's been a while since I watched the whole series, but I love at the end when they're doing that stupid, um, like trying to make the picture, trying to like faking the guy who was like to make it look like he's the mediator in the Sandpiper case
Yep.
is like taking money from Jimmy, and she's so into it. Like she throws her shoes out, she's running in the grass, like do it like this, do it like this, and like she's like directing this propaganda film out of nowhere.
She's great. Man, there's so many good moments. I have to say one of my favorite like Rhea Seahorn acting moments
Yeah.
versus like actual Kim moments is just her ugly crying on the bus in Waterworks.
Oh yeah,
Like
that's good.
just for her like suddenly to break down, you're like, oh my gosh. Like it usually ugly crying doesn't translate well on screen, but it did for that. And it's just like she finally is able to confront what she's been burying and trying to absolve and running from for
Mhm.
all these years.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think also that's why shit, like going back to the lady, I think there was like some sort of intentional with Lady Macbeth and tying that in, because I thought there was a Lady Macbeth reference early on or
It
at
might have
some
been.
point. And then for her to work at a water works company, a sprinkler manufacturer of like, I think there's a metaphor there.
I
Maybe
think
I'm
so.
reading too much into it. I
No,
don't
I
know.
think that could be true.
Yep. All right. And then the man himself, Jimmy, Saul, Gene, Goodman, McGill, what's it?
Hakovic.
Hackvick. Yep. That's the one.
Yeah, the main guy.
The main guy. And that, like I said earlier, his character, like there's 3 layers of him, and they all have a suitable conclusion in that finale. So let's talk about Gene.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get much, like up until the last 4 episodes, we have like 20 minutes of Gene
Yeah.
in the whole series.
Yeah. And we get that one little thing where he blurts out, "Get a lawyer." So we can tell that the Jimmy and Saul is bubbling up in him. He can't keep it in there forever.
Yeah. Gene is a neutered version. Like Gene doesn't have the heart of Jimmy, and he doesn't have the charisma of Saul.
No.
And he has the worst parts of both of those characters. And like, he's kind of like an onion, like the ogres have layers. He has layers, and Gene is like this final outer layer of this broken man who's this sad sack of a human being who, like then in those final episodes, he's taking a shot at these glory days after Jeff brings him back into this, and he does that and had fun with that whole ripping off the department store, and is like, wait, this is who I am. Let me go back to who I was. And so then when he's caught, he's put in jail, and he's in that jail cell. He's like, this is how you get caught. This is how you get caught. And then like he starts laughing. To me, that's like the conclusion of the Gene storyline of like, no, this isn't who I am. Let me go back to who I am. And that's to me is how Gene ends.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's weird, like kind of like the 1 through 3 you say is like there's 2 different shows. I think 1 through 3 is Jimmy, and 4 through 6 is Saul.
Yeah,
maybe it's not the exact split. Maybe it's like 1 through 4 and 5 and 6, but I think you definitely have that transition by the end.
Yeah, because Saul is a persona as well, and like you see that the most when he's interacting with Kimmy in the penultimate episode in Waterworks, when he's talking with her as Saul, and she comes in and he kind of puts on this big performance for Kim, and she's signing the papers, but he's just like with Francesca's like, "Hey, sweet cheeks," and like being that Saul, he is so extra and so over the top, but yet Kim, of course, knows that this isn't the real Jimmy, and like she says that essentially to Aaron Paul, why Jesse, when they're outside, and is like, is he a good lawyer? And it's like, well, when I knew him, he was. And so like, this isn't him. This is not the Jimmy that she knows. So Saul is this big, pretend, lavish character that it's really hard to pinpoint when he pops out in that show, because it's like once Chuck dies, that then Jimmy has to hide the grief, and he hides the grief in Saul.
He definitely does. Especially there's that moment where he decides like, no, I'm gonna go by Saul Goodman. Like register me as a lawyer as Saul Goodman. And wasn't it Kim who kind of gave him a look at that point? If I remember,
and then he does like the finger guns to her as he's walking away, and she looks horrified. Yet then the next season she's like, I'm all aboard it. All aboard it. That's what she says.
Yeah, and I like how I think it was only Lala who called her Mrs. Goodman.
Oh, Lalo.
Yeah.
Man, there was some really good meme worthy stuff that Lalo did, like the rolling down the window, the car window, and there's like Lalo's smiling face in that one episode when he goes to his house. Or when he jumped in Bagman, he jumped in from the desert like all the way down to Jimmy's car, like this huge leap, like, oh my gosh. Or like falling in from the ceiling in the travel wire.
Yeah.
Just some of the stuff he did, you're like, all right, Lalo, he's extra. He's something, man.
Yeah, but he can do a lot of acrobatic stuff.
So Saul's conclusion for me, and wrapping up his character, was when he finally dropped it in that courtroom scene that I was referencing earlier, when Kim's there. That he starts off as that Saul character, and then Kim's there, and he's like, all right, I wanted her to see this. I wanted her to see, I'm done with Saul. He's gone. I'm back to Jimmy, even if it costs me years or the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I'm back to Jimmy.
Yep. And I love that they brought in Marie and Gomez's wife to be
Yeah.
there as well. That was cool.
Yeah, this show did a really good job restraining itself with the cameos, but to let them play out,
Mm-hmm.
like I really love the Walter, Jesse, and Saul when they're in the Bounder,
Yeah.
in the Breaking Bad, and it's like they picked up where they left off, and
Yeah.
Walter's like, no, don't give him more information than we need to give him, and Jesse's like, he's standing in a meth lab. I'm sure he's gonna figure it out.
Yeah. I feel he was like in the courtroom. Jimmy was like, I was not there when the meth was cooked. I was not when it was sold, but I damn sure knew what was going on. And I was more than a willing participant.
Yeah, and it's like the Walter was nothing without me. I am guilty, 100%.
And that's a nail in the coffin for Walt because Walt would not stand for that, but he's dead, so he can't.
No. So he has to lay for it, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, the other great Walter. Oh my gosh, this was so Bryan Cranston also was talking in some sort of interview and asked about these couple episodes that he was in, and he's like, I had to look back and see what Walt I was in season 2 and season 4 and those sorts of things, like when these are supposed to take place. And I'm like, that is just tremendous care to the craft, because Bryan Cranston really did show an evolution of Walt's character gradually. And you look at season 1 Walt, and he is very different than season 4, season 5 Walt, or season 2
absolutely.
Walt. And so he went right back into season 2 Walt for the Breaking Bad episode and final season Walt when he's chastising Jimmy because he asked the time machine question. He's like, time travel's impossible. I'm like, it's like, you want to ask about regrets? Ask about regrets. Don't make up this time travel nonsense. I'm like, dude, Walt, you are a jerk. He's just asking a freaking hypothetical. Calm down.
Yeah. But it's one way that he can be like, no, I'm better than you.
Oh my gosh, that was his magnum opus. Walter White, I am better than you.
Yeah.
All right. And then finally, of course, Jimmy, his resolution is that final scene with Kim when they're smoking together and they're finally able to they come back again. Sure, they're not going to be able to be married again. She's with Mr. Yep man, and he's in prison. So I mean, there's not a chance for him.
Yeah.
But that they still do love each other. You can tell they still have that love even after all these years. Except for now, it's just they're facing the music.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Kim's she's not in a prison, but she's in a version. Like she is this neutered housewife, and that is not the Kim that we know and love.
She's like Agatha Harkness being stuck as the nosy neighbor in WandaVision.
Yeah. Like having to have conversations about Miracle Whip.
Yeah. Great.
Good for you.
Yeah. She's stuck in a boring world, which to her is like probably the worst thing.
Yeah. Yep. It's that's what's also really good about the writing of the show is that every character gets what they deserve. Even though you like Mike, he did deserve a bullet. Even though you were intrigued by Gus, he needed to die. Even though you intrigued by Walt, he needed to die. Jesse gets to escape and have a version of a life. He deserves that. Saul, maybe. Yeah, I guess you could argue that. Saul deserves prison. Kim deserves some consequence, but maybe not prison. They do a really good job of just making sure everyone has their just desserts.
I'm not sure Howard deserved what he got, though.
Yeah, that's fair. People in the game. That's
okay. Yeah, everybody else.
Yeah, Howard served a purpose though. Was supposed to be tragic. There's some other character deaths that are Jesse's girlfriend in Breaking Bad. That was tragic, or her dad killing himself shortly after. Yeah. Both of those very tragic, but it served that point to corrupt Walt's soul and show that he doesn't have the remorse now. Or Gail Bedecker. There's another one.
Oh, Gail's probably the most tragic.
I mean, he was in the game, even though he didn't realize. Maybe he was a little naive and blissfully unaware how much of the game he was in. He was in the game.
It's true.
But does he deserve a death? I don't think so.
No. So, any other stray observations?
Not that I can think of. I told you I was so excited. I think I talked maybe twice as much as you did. I was just so excited for
I
this.
probably did too, but I still love this show. I still think it's better than Breaking Bad, and I mean they're both tremendous shows and very rewatchable.
Oh, here you go. What is your favorite? I know I'm putting you on the spot here. What
Okay.
would you say is your favorite moment from either Breaking Saul or Better Call Bad?
Yeah.
Which is your what do you think is a top moment for you in both of those shows?
I think top moment is got to be either Ozymandias, that whole thing, or the Gus Hector deaths. They're both Breaking Bad,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Ozymandias was that whole episode was just tremendous, top notch television.
Mhm.
I still think I don't like Better Call Saul is so good. I don't think an episode of Better Call Saul got quite as good as Ozymandias was.
No, but I love the character of Saul though.
Yeah, me too. And then to give him a heart and to make
Mhm.
him a multi-dimensional character. Like I said, there's 3 characters that we saw of this one actor.
Mhm.
I loved, like I said earlier, I love Chuck's chicanery speech.
Yeah.
But I think my all-time favorite was actually, it was such a tense scene, was Hank against the twins. When they were
that's such a good one.
that, and like no music, it was just tense, and then watching him fight his way out of this, so well done.
Mhm.
It was a really well filmed scene.
Because the first time you're watching it, you don't know if he's going to die in that moment.
Yeah, and and oh my gosh, it's this unstoppable force of these twins. They built the twins up so well, and then you also have Hank, who you're like, come on, you got to pull this out, and you're rooting for him, but he gets hurt. But he gets it. He makes it. Such good television, guys. Obviously, at this point, we've ruined it all for you if you have not seen those. But if you haven't, still go see them. They're so good.
And even if we did spoil it for you, it's one thing to hear about it, it's another thing to see it.
Oh, that was the other thing I was going to say, and then I either got caught off or forgot to say it, is that this show did do a really good restraint with the cameos that it had. Like, I love that they brought back Hank and Gomez for a couple episodes. They didn't overuse them. They probably could have used them a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because Saul did have connections with them. He had run-ins with them a number of times. So they probably could have used them a little bit more, but I get having restraint. But yeah, we got most of that main cast of characters. We didn't get Skyler and we didn't get Flynn or Walt Jr.
I think they're the only ones.
That would be hard. That would be a stretch to get them involved, I think. No. But
they could have potentially been there with Marie at the end, but I think it would have been overkill.
They almost had Marie in season 1 when Chuck had to go to the hospital because she was a nurse. But they, again, had that restraint of like, no, that the chance meeting like that would have pulled us out of it. And so it was a lot more natural way to include her in the finale as Hank's widow and her being at the trial. That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
So, well, that is it. So, let's jump back to trivia. Last week we talked about Cartoon Network shows. So if you were a kid of the 90s, you probably saw some of these shows. And so one of the shows we talked about was Powerpuff Girls with a villain in it named Him. And Him was based off of a character from another medium. And what character was that? This is a deep cut for you guys. It is from the Beatles' Yellow Submarine movie. There's a character, the antagonist, the Chief Blue Meanie. They based him off of the Chief Blue Meanie from this cartoon of the band from 30 years prior.
That's
so there
wild.
You go. All right. And then this week's trivia, do you mind?
Go for it. I didn't have anything.
So when we talked about Breaking Bad, we talked about some episode titles and how what these episode titles meant. Season 2 episode titles also had a special meaning. Do you know what season 2 the meaning was for their episode titles?
I believe so. I don't remember exactly the details, but I think I know the gist of it.
All right. Well, you'll find out next week if Brian is right.
Yeah.
Next week, we are doing something that I'm kind of interested to. I'm a bit of a history nerd. And so there's a lot of TV that is based on real events. So we're going to talk about some of these TV shows that were kind of pretty much a true story. And so we've been seeing a lot of those recently. And so it was worth an episode. So we'll talk about that next week.
Sounds good.
Until next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And we're reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.